in the nation that sparked the Arab Spring. Tunisians abroad taking part this Friday in early voting ahead of Sunday's legislative elections. But there's plenty of uncertainty. But with the poll taking place between rounds of a presidential election brought forth by the July death of the country's head of state, adding to the confusion the recent jailing of one of the two runoff candidates, media mogul Nabil Karoui, who finished runner-up behind independent candidate Kais Saied. Well, joining us from Tunis, he ran in the first round of that presidential poll, Tunisian Prime Minister Youssef Chahed. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Thank you for the invitation.
We were expecting words from the interim president. What are we expecting to hear?
I think the president will ask Tunisians to go to vote on Sunday for the legislative election, which will be a very important event for Tunisia because, of course, we are talking more about presidential election, but also legislative are, I can say, much more important, given the nature of the Tunisian constitution. So I think the president will ask Tunisians to participate because during the last September 15th election, participation rate was around 15%, which is, let's say, lower than 2014 participation. At that time, it was around 64%. So we hope that we have more participation, especially young Tunisians, to go to vote on Sunday.
Because it is an unprecedented situation, having legislative elections on Sunday and then the runoff for the presidential poll on the 25th. Will many citizens stay away? Does it skew the result of the legislative elections?
You know, this situation after the death of President Beji Caid Sibsi in July 25th, the constitution obliged to have a 90 days election in 90 days. That's why we have this difficult calendar, having a legislative election between two rounds of presidential election. But of course, today is the last day of the campaign for the legislative. Tomorrow will be a silent day, so Sunday, and we hope that people will go to vote. Unfortunately, there was not enough debate on economic, social, political parties and candidate program. The debate was more focused on the presidential election, but as I mentioned, legislative are really important for the next decades.
Would it have been simpler to have the legislative elections the same day as the presidential poll?
You know, this was depending of appeals. You know, candidates, including myself, we appeal after the first round of the presidential, and taking into account the dates, there were no other choice for the independent authority that is managing election easy to put the second round on October 13.
This 2019 electoral cycle in Tunisia, all dictated by timing. There's the timing of President Beji Caid Sibsi's death back in July, and there's the timing of one of the two runoff candidates for the presidential election, Nabil Karoui. Charges had been looming for a long time against the media mogul. Is justice blind, or is it a political vendetta keeping him in jail at this time?
Now, Tunisia is a democracy. The justice is totally independent, completely independent in Tunisia. Since after the revolution, this was one of the major reforms that were done in Tunisia after the 2011 revolution. The justice is totally independent. Of course, the situation is a unique situation, but we respect the independence of the justice. Mr. Karoui was arrested by a judge, by a financial poll, judiciary financial poll. He was arrested on charge of tax evasion and money laundering. So,
but why now?
I think the judiciary process, you know, because the judiciary process and time is totally independent from the political timeline. And this, again, I think he was arrested after a complaint done by a local NGO called iWatch. And I mean, the justice, again, is totally independent, and it gave us a unique situation now in Tunisia.
Mr. Prime Minister, will you agree that Nabil Karoui will have a strong case in arguing that it's unfair to have to campaign from jail?
Yes, but again, there is no political prisoner in Tunisia. Nabil Karoui is not a political prisoner. He's charged with other, Tunisia was also blacklisted 2 years ago with FATF because of money laundering and tax evasion. We did a huge effort. So he's not a political prisoner. He was arrested for as I mentioned, tax evasion, money laundering. The justice is totally independent. We are not happy about that, but we don't have any interference as executive power with the judiciary system, and this is democracy in Tunisia today.
The rest of the Arab world is, of course, watching Tunisia, one of the few countries where there are multi-party elections of this sort in the Arab world. How do you now deliver credible leaders through the ballot box under these confused circumstances?
That's why I think participation rate needs to be more important. We need to, of course, Tunisia, as I'm always mentioning, this is a learning curve for democracy. We need between two elections to review and take lessons from what was done, for example, in 2014 election, especially for the electoral code, for how to have a better participation, especially for young Tunisian. The still low level of participation of the young generation in Tunisia, which is the majority of the Tunisian population. So I think that we need to learn a lesson, especially between two elections. Probably we did not learn enough lesson from 2014 election in order to better prepare 2019. But of course, this is, I mean, Tunisia democracy has just 8 years, which is nothing in this 3,000 years country.
So you're in favor of sticking to the schedule. I know there was a meeting that took place between the president and that quartet that won the Nobel Peace Prize, composed of most notably union leaders, business leaders, human rights groups. Is there an alternate path that perhaps can clear the confusion?
10 years ago, the election in Tunisia were organized by the Ministry of Interior with 99% result. Today, the government has nothing to do with the organization of election. There is an independent high authority that is in charge of that. We just help them with logistics and funding the election, but we don't interfere in anything. So the calendar is really decided by this high authority, and as I understand, this authority would like to maintain this calendar.
PM Chahed, who's the frontrunner, let's talk about him for a second. A 61-year-old constitutional lawyer. He has campaigned on a ticket of being against political parties. Your thoughts on what kind of a president he will make in view of what he has said on the campaign trail?
I think, what happened in September 15th was what we call anti-system candidates, especially Mr. PM Chahed, who has a different view of power organization. He's a professor of law professor, so I don't know him very well, but of course, again, the prerogatives of the president in Tunisia are really centralized with defense and foreign affairs. So economy and social affairs and security are with the presidency of the government. That's why, again, legislative election will be really crucial for the political party who will constitute the next government, especially that we will face a lot of challenges in Tunisia. We are again under IMF agreement. There is a lot of security challenges with what's happening in Libya. We have 500 kilometers border in Libya, so a lot of challenges for the next government. And of course, we need to form this government as quick as possible after the election. And of course, there are some threats if we see the global picture now and the composition of the different parties that will run for Sunday.
And are you endorsing one of the two candidates?
You know, I'm also president of Tahya Tunis Party. We'll decide that next week.
All right, we shall see. I want to thank you, Youssef Chahed, Tunisia.